Mike.
You don't ask me any questions, I won't have to tell you a lie.
People like hearing about what you have to say, just in general, about cars, life, the world, all that kind of stuff. Quick 5 questions with Mike.
5 questions with Mike. Okay, that's as many fingers as I have on one hand, right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So tell us what was your first car you ever owned, and what did it mean to you? What are your memories of that car?
The first actual car I owned, the second vehicle I owned was my first car. My first vehicle was a 51 International pickup truck with a 6-cylinder that the battery was always dead and I had to hand crank it to start it. It's kind of cool. Bolo. Anyway, but my first car was a 1961 Sunbeam Alpine. Basically the exact same car as what we built on the show with Lincoln and the winter test drive. And it was the coolest thing I'd ever owned. I took out a loan at 28% to buy it from TransCanada Credit, paid it back as quick as I could, and I had the most fun I'd ever had in a vehicle. It was my first vehicle, but it was just so cool. Just banging gears, top, down. I never did have maybe I did have a roof on it, but it wasn't up much. Anyway, it was just one of the coolest things that I'd ever owned, and that's why 50 years later, I wanted to recreate that feeling, and we put a V6 into a 1961 Sunbeam Alpine. It took 50 years to get back to it, but like they say, if you've got enough time and money and resources, you can relive your youth. Just costs a lot more now.
And what was your youth like? Did you have fun? What was your youth like?
Basically, I played a lot of sports in school. I did a few things I shouldn't have, and then at 18, I went to work. So that was it. A lot of work.
When you look back on your youth, do you have any regrets, or do you have?
I have no regrets. The only problem in life with having regrets is there's nothing you can do about it. The only thing you can change right now is the present. You can't change the future. You can't change the past. All you can change is right now. It might not have any effect on your past, but you can change the future, but only by changing the present. So, right, live in the moment. We just took where we drove the Chevelle from Tappan to Toronto to Detroit to Vegas back to Tappan. It was 11,000 kilometers in 20 days. We saw a lot of amazing country. Saw a lot of amazing weather as well. I think that's one of the trips I will remember until my dying day. Because we never made it coast to coast, but hopefully, God willing, and the Chevelle gets built, and 2 months we'll be going on one that's even going to be more epic, almost twice as long. But we will try to go coast to coast, all the way. Well, like I said, Bryce Canyon, some of the things in Utah, even just driving through the Rockies, we forget how beautiful Canada truly is. And I've heard nothing but amazing stories about the East Coast, not only the scenery, but the people, everything. So, I'm really looking forward to it. I've been across the prairies numerous times when I was a kid. I've been to Toronto now twice. It was pretty spectacular driving down along the shores of the Great Lakes. But I'd really like to see it coast to coast. We live in one of the most beautiful countries on the planet, and it'd be cool, like I said, to go from coast to coast. See what happens. We're trying. 6 days a week. Here we go, Nova. Check that out. Is it an old guy or a young kid? Sounds healthy. Let's see what he's got.
Get next to him.
Give him thumbs up. See, old guy reliving his youth.
Yeah, big question here. I don't know if we've ever asked this. Maybe we have. How did your passion for cars begin, and who or what inspired it?
Basically, my passion for cars probably began when I was a young kid. We'd actually go to all the car lots, and we'd steal the little valve stems that used to be able to take just the valve caps. They were back in the old days. All the cars came with 4 steel valve caps that had a valve stem removal tool on it. We used to just go and pick them off for something to do, and we just wandered through the car lots. And so in 1968, I would have been 11 or 12. So we'd be riding our bikes, me and my brothers, and we'd just stop and look at all the new cars. There'd be Chargers, there'd be Mustangs, Fastbacks, Chevelles, and we just grew up watching those cars. And once you turn 15 or 16, I mean, everybody, the time I was 16 would have been 1973. So there was a lot of those cars were out there. You know what I mean? They were all 4 or 5 years old, 2, 3 years old. There was 340s, 6-pack Cudas, and big block Chargers, and Road Runners, and the big block Chevelles, and they were all out there. They were driving around, and that was the impression you got. Those were the cars that you were going to own. And then once I started working, I started buying them. I mean, at one time I owned like 20 Novas, 62 to 65s with a couple 6s and 7s. I had a yard full. And then it just grew from there. And we bought the farm, and I got up to 200. When we moved from my first place in Kamloops up to the farm, I had about 40 or 50 cars. Well, 20 years later, I was up to 200. Then I bought the wrecking yard, and it went all bad. The next thing you know, I had 500. And the thing was, because of my job, I always spent all summer working, and all I could do was buy cars. I never really had time to work on them. And come winter, I was living on EI, never really had the money to fix them. So it was just 40 years of collecting. Then finally the show came along, and we started building cars. I mean, I'd only worked on a couple in the 40 years before that, because it was just more or less of an obsession. Just buy. But then I tell you, it's cheaper to buy them than it is to fix them. Ask me how I know.
Question number 4. What's the most challenging restoration project you've ever undertaken, and what did you learn from it?
The most challenging one we ever did on the show was that 66 Lincoln convertible. Just when we watched that Jay Leno episode and his guys couldn't figure out how to get the roof done. Jay Leno's worth, I don't know, a couple $100 million. And when he's saying there's one guy that knows how these cars work, I looked at my crew and said, what the hell are we doing? Then we actually talked to the guy. I forget what his name was, but he spent 6 months of the year in Palm Springs, the other 6 months in Florida, only working on Ford Continental convertibles. He is the guru, the holy grail of Lincoln Continental convertibles. And he said, I will tell you right now, son, you will never get that car to work right. You will pay me $150 an hour American, and you will ship me that car. We almost did, but I mean, like I said, just the sheer complexity of that car, like 26 relays, 12 miles of wiring, and everything had to work in sequence. It was a friggin' nightmare, that car. Yes, it was a steep learning curve.
My God, was it ever. Okay.
Yeah.
And how have cars and car culture changed since you first became interested in them?
Well, basically, car culture, I mean, I think there's a much bigger percentage of people that are actually, especially with all the YouTube videos and the car restoration shows, it is a lot easier getting the knowledge to actually build them. I mean, before you basically had to go take a welding course or go to school to become a mechanic. I mean, now, like I said, you can YouTube just about anything, and there's people that have done one or are doing one. There's car clubs. So, I mean, it has gotten a lot easier, and there's way more information. The unfortunate part of it is due to inflation and just the rising cost of everything, the cost of restoring them has gone through the roof. It is, I mean, unless you're doing all the work yourself. I mean, basically any major restoration is going to be 600, 700, 800 to 1,000 hours, if not more. And if you've got to pay somebody 60, 80, $100 an hour, you're at 60 to 100,000 before you've even bought a part for the car. And since COVID, parts have doubled, materials have doubled. I mean, the cost is going through the roof. I basically tell people, unless you can afford to throw $100,000 at a toy or more, go buy one that's done. A lot of people have built the cars. There's a lot of nice cars being built. And the problem is most of the projects now, all the good projects are gone. I mean, most of these cars are 50 years old. Sure, there's the odd barn find, but I mean, most of what people are buying, I mean, basically half the cars I bought that sold at the auction, I bought as parts cars, but yet 20, 30 years later, down our restoration projects, right? They went from being a parts car to a restoration project, but just because there's what do you call it? The pickings are indeed slim, right? Now that's how it's changed. I mean, it's just there's way less project cars to find for a good deal. people want way more, and with the cost of, with inflation and the price increases of everything, it's almost impossible to build a car if you're getting somebody else to do it. I mean, unless you're very, very wealthy. That's why when we're doing this YouTube, we're not really trying to do high-end builds, because we realize most people do not have the money. That's why we don't have CNC machines in our shop. We don't have very many expensive tools. We've got a bead roller, we've got a wire feed, we've got some electric battery-powered hand tools and hand tools. So I mean, basically what we're trying to show people is this is what the average person can do with average tools.
Speaking of projects,